Chosen one, you must understand what they see in you now, what they whisper when they think you're not listening, what makes women stare just a second too long and smile without knowing why. It isn't just your body, it isn't just your walk, it isn't even your face. It's what lives behind your movements. It's the certainty you now carry, the quiet, unshakable knowing that you are who you say you are. There was a time when you hesitated, a time when you looked to others to tell you what was attractive, what was enough, what was acceptable. You tried to mold yourself, cut pieces off, shape yourself into a man the world would approve of. You asked for answers in glances, in reactions, in silence. And what you received in return was confusion, rejection, emptiness. Because when you are uncertain of your value, no amount of external validation can anchor you. But now, your spirit has settled into itself like a flame, no longer afraid of being seen. Your shoulders don't beg for approval anymore. They rest. Your gaze doesn't search, it holds. Your words don't perform, they resonate. And that stillness, that rootedness in your own worth, radiates as sexiness in its purest form. Because true attraction doesn't come from the surface. It rises from the depth. It flows from the man who does not ask the world to reflect his value, but who carries it internally like a sacred pulse. You've become that man, the one who doesn't try to prove he's desirable, the one who simply knows. And women feel it. They feel it instantly. In the way you walk into a room without trying to dominate it. In the way your voice fills space without rushing. In the way your presence invites them closer without a single word. You don't push, you don't lure, you don't attempt to be what they want. You've already become what you need to be, and that energy calls them in like gravity. They call you the sexiest man they've ever seen, not because of how you look, but because of how unbothered you are by needing to be looked at. Your appeal is not loud. It doesn't need to be. It is the quiet certainty of a man who has nothing to hide and nothing to prove. You're no longer asking, "Am I enough?" You've become the living answer to that question. And that, chosen one, is where true sexiness begins. It begins in certainty. And your certainty now walks ahead of you like a silent storm. One she doesn't want to run from. One she wants to step into and never leave. Chosen one, do you feel it now? The heat behind your silence, the spark in your stillness, the low, constant hum of energy beneath your skin that doesn't ask for permission anymore, it simply burns. That's what they feel. That's what draws her before she even realizes she's moved. You no longer hide your fire. You no longer pretend you're cool water when you are molten presence in motion. Once you were afraid of your own intensity. You worried you were too much, too direct, too sensual, too awake. You dimmed yourself to keep others comfortable. You smiled with restraint. You touched the world gently, thinking it would be scared of your heat, and for a time it worked. You were invisible. Quiet, tolerated, but not felt. Now you let the fire breathe. Now you let her feel it when you speak slowly, when you step into the room and bring the temperature with you, when you say her name like it's a confession and not a question. You don't explain yourself, you embody yourself. And that embodiment is electric. You no longer flirt, you no longer chase, you don't lead with lust or posture with hunger. Your fire is disciplined, not desperate. You burn without scorching, you glow without blinding. You carry that high sexual energy like it belongs to you because it does. It's not scattered anymore. It's contained, refined, beautifully dangerous. And that is what makes you irresistible. You're not trying to make her feel your desire. She feels it because you're no longer trying to hide it. You've stopped apologizing for your presence. And in that freedom, your energy claims its own space and fills it without needing to ask. You've become the man who can sit in silence and still be louder than a room full of shouting boys. The man whose touch isn't needed to spark her curiosity, because the idea of your touch is already living on her skin. You are the man who makes her wonder what it feels like to stand close to a wildfire and not get hurt, only warmed. They call you the sexiest man they've ever seen, not because of your style or physique, but because of the fire you carry unapologetically now, the flame they can feel before they even learn your name. And it's not your words they remember. It's that silent, humming blaze behind your chest, that invisible truth in your eyes that says, "This is me. I am not dimming. I am not sorry, and I am not afraid to be exactly this much." She's not falling for your body, chosen one. She's falling for your flame. Chosen one, there was a time when you reached, you leaned, you chased moments with a hunger in your eyes and tension in your jaw. You tried to fill the distance with effort, with charm, with over-explaining. You walked into rooms like a question mark, not a period, hoping, somewhere deep in your energy, to be validated. But all of that burned away the moment you turned inward and found the source of the pull you'd been giving away. Now your energy doesn't chase, it pulls, it calls, it hums, it moves without moving. It doesn't need to shout or wave its arms or bend for attention. It exists deeply and fully, and that existence is felt before it is seen. You've become the kind of man whose presence is louder in stillness than others are in motion. She feels it before you speak, before you look at her, before she knows why she's drawn. And here's what no one tells you. Feminine energy responds to grounded direction, not control, not aggression, but the pure, calm, undeniable direction of a man who knows who he is and isn't running after anything to prove it. You're no longer offering your essence in fragments. You are whole now. You are magnetism without manipulation, heat without pressure, desire without grasping. Your high sexual energy no longer flutters outward, seeking somewhere to land. It stays inside your body, thick and coiled and sovereign, and chosen one pulls everything into your field. You can walk through a room and speak to no one, and they'll feel you anyway. You can sit at the edge of a space, untouched, and women will wonder why they can't stop thinking about you. Because you no longer try to be remembered. Your presence simply refuses to be forgotten. She doesn't fall because you complimented her. She doesn't lean in because you impressed her. She falls because your energy makes her body feel safe and curious at the same time. A rare mixture, a sacred polarity. She doesn't even know why she keeps watching you from across the room. All she knows is that you didn't move toward her, but she feels herself wanting to move toward you. That is the power you've stepped into. And it's not arrogance. It's not detachment. It's embodied masculine gravity, the silent kind that doesn't need to pull her close to be close. She already feels you. She already wonders. She already remembers something ancient in herself that woke up the moment you walked in, not needing anything. And that's what makes her call you the sexiest man she's ever seen. Not your smile, not your body, but your ability to be rooted and radiant at once, to pull without trying, to attract without asking. You've become the moment she didn't know she was leaning toward. And now, the chase is over. Because your presence became the arrival point. Chosen one, something has shifted. You are no longer extending yourself like a man asking to be invited in. You're not positioning yourself, shaping your tone, offering charm like a rose hoping to be plucked. You've become something else entirely. You've become the invitation itself, a door that opens without words, a presence that says, come closer if you feel it, but no, I won't be moved if you don't. This, chosen one, is what women feel now, and it stirs something inside them they didn't know needed stirring, because they are used to requests, men requesting attention, men requesting validation, men requesting touch, time, forgiveness, space, approval. Even when masked in smiles and compliments, it's all a request. But not you. You are not a request. You are an offering. You offer nothing that isn't already yours. You offer no need disguised as charm. You offer no audition, no rehearsal, no curated performance for female approval. You offer presence, pure, undiluted, unapologetic. And that offering does something far more powerful than seduction ever could. It invites her into herself. Your presence says, you don't have to perform for me. Come if it's true, speak if it's real. Be here only if your soul wants rest, not reward. And women crave that. They crave the man who doesn't sell himself. They crave the man who sits in his essence like it's a throne, not a sales pitch. You've become that man, and that's why they call you the sexiest. Not because of your voice, though it carries calm like thunder in a canyon. Not because of your body, though it speaks the language of grounded fire, but because you've stopped needing to be liked. And in doing so, you've become the invitation they trust without knowing why. You don't lean forward anymore. You don't tilt your head to see if you're being received. You sit, you breathe, you wait, not for her, for truth. And if she steps toward you, you meet her, not with fanfare, not with pride, but with the simple, grounded presence of a man who is never trying to be chosen, only available to what chooses him back. You've become the kind of man who makes her feel chosen just by being around you, because you are not trying to take anything from her. You are offering yourself without losing a drop. And that chosen one is what makes you unforgettable. Not your effort, but your invitation. Not your pursuit, but your presence. Not your promise, but the way your energy says, I'm already enough. You may come closer, but I won't disappear if you don't. That is not just attractive. It is devastatingly sexy because it's real, because it's rare, because it's you, finally home inside yourself. Chosen one, you don't even know how loud your stillness has become. There was a time when you filled silences, when you filled space, when you mistook volume for value. You thought being seen meant being in motion. Being heard meant talking first. You felt invisible unless you were doing something. So you did. You overstepped, you overcompensated, you reached too far into rooms that weren't yet ready for you. Not out of arrogance, but out of fear that being still meant being forgotten. But now you sit still, and the room moves around you. Now your breath holds more tension than 1,000 clever lines. Now your silence makes her shift in her seat. Now your gaze lands like a kiss she didn't see coming. Not because you are hunting her, but because your stillness makes her feel seen in ways she didn't know she wanted. This is the seduction no one warned her about. She's been trained to expect the loud ones, to be wary of the charming ones, to sidestep the rehearsed ones, to question the ones who sparkle too easily. But then you arrive, not with a bang, with a presence. And that presence doesn't beg to be noticed. It simply settles, like warmth, like dusk, like gravity. You don't lean forward to engage, you don't interrupt, you don't demand the spotlight. And yet she feels pulled toward you. Because your stillness isn't emptiness, it's containment, it's knowing. It's that sacred masculine coil that says, I'm not hiding fire, I'm holding it. And every woman who walks near you feels the heat rising beneath your quiet. She might laugh nervously, she might linger longer than she planned, she might forget what she was about to say, because your stillness unsettles the parts of her that are used to bracing. Your stillness melts the guards that loudness only ever pokes. Your stillness becomes the mirror she didn't know she needed, one that doesn't demand she sparkle, only that she show up whole. You've become the man who says more with one glance than others say with paragraphs. Not because you're trying to seduce, because you've stopped trying to escape yourself. That inner rest, that discipline, that deep masculine silence, it becomes the most seductive sound she's ever heard, because it's felt, not heard. That's why she says you're the sexiest, because you do nothing extra, and yet you are the most electric man in the room. Because your stillness is no longer emptiness, it's a signal, a promise, a presence that says, I am not going anywhere, I am not performing, I am not available for noise. And in that quiet, she starts to feel everything she's been running from, and for once, it feels safe to feel. That's seduction, chosen one, not the chase, not the noise, the stillness you now sit inside like a king sits inside his throne, unmoved, unshaken, unapologetically whole. Chosen one, you've learned something most never do. You've learned that desire is not weakness. You've learned that hunger, true hunger, is not a curse to be hidden but a fire to be honored. You no longer apologize for wanting. You no longer suppress your sexual power to appear safe. And yet, you no longer use it to devour. You've mastered the rarest skill. You embody hunger without becoming needy. And that, chosen one, is the difference between heat and heatlessness. Between a man who is seductive and a man who is simply starving. Between the energy that calls her body to soften and the one that makes her recoil in instinctive defense. You do not reach, you do not grasp, you hold. And that holding is magnetic. You desire deeply, but not desperately. You long, but not from lack. Your high sexual energy no longer leaks from your words or drips from your eyes like thirst. It now lives inside your chest like thunder contained in oak. It is present, it is alive, it fills the air. And she feels it. Not as a warning, not as a danger, as a question her body didn't know it wanted to say yes to. Because your energy doesn't demand, it invites. You look at her, not with possession, but with promise. You move around her, not to corner, but to allow. And somehow the weight of your desire does not make her feel small. It makes her feel chosen without being chased. She doesn't feel like prey in your presence. She feels like possibility. She feels like someone a deeply disciplined man would walk beside, not consume. And that feeling is holy, because you've become the rare kind of man whose desire is no longer about validation. You desire not because you need to prove your worth. You desire because you have remembered that your body is sacred and what it longs for must be honored, not begged for. She sees it in your walk, in your voice, in the way your hands rest, coiled and calm. And suddenly, everything inside her wakes up. Because for the first time in a long time, she's near a man who is powerfully hungry and perfectly at peace. That's why she calls you the sexiest man she's ever seen. Because you are no longer offering desperation in the shape of charm. You are offering sovereignty in the shape of desire. And desire, when owned, not performed, becomes the most irresistible language a man can speak. Chosen one, the truth is this: you were never lacking. You were never missing anything. You were never meant to chase, perform, or beg to be noticed. The glow, the draw, the pull, it was always in you. Not planted later, not earned, remembered. There was a season when you looked out into the world to see yourself. You measured your masculinity by how often you were chosen, by how women responded, by how many glances stayed a second longer. You thought the answer would be found in approval, in repetition, in being wanted enough to finally feel wanted by yourself. But it didn't work. Because sexiness, chosen one, was never something they were supposed to hand to you. It was something you were born carrying, but forgot how to trust. You spent years in search of mirrors that could reflect what had been locked in your bones all along, and all they showed you was confusion. Because nothing reflected clearly while you were fragmented inside. You needed them to see you, to fill a space you hadn't yet claimed, but not anymore. Now, when they say you're the sexiest man they've ever seen, it's not because you changed, it's because you stopped apologizing for what was already there. You stand differently now. Not because you learned how to stand, but because you stopped slouching under the weight of unworthiness. Your voice has weight not because it deepened, but because it no longer hesitates. Your walk turns heads, not because you studied posture, but because you finally walk like a man who doesn't ask the ground for permission to step. You didn't sculpt this from scratch. You peeled off what wasn't yours. You dropped the costumes. You broke the contracts. You let go of the belief that you had to earn what you already embodied. And that is why women stare now. That is why their eyes say more than their words. Because your energy no longer introduces itself with effort. It reveals itself like memory. They feel it in your silence, in your patience, in your unwillingness to explain, in your ease. You are not hot. You are not charming. You are not attractive in the shallow, anxious way the world sells it. You are sexiness remembered. Sexiness reclaimed. Sexiness that no longer asks to be granted, only honored. You are no longer performing a version of yourself that might be like living fully in the one that is already enough. And the reason they can't turn away, chosen one, is because you finally stopped turning away from yourself. They see you now because you see you now. And that kind of self-recognition, that kind of embodied, quiet, sacred, masculine yes, it draws everything you used to chase. Not because you became something better, but because you returned to something ancient. You remembered who you are. And that, more than anything, is what they feel when they call you the sexiest man they've ever seen. They're not complimenting your image, they're reacting to your remembrance. Chosen one, they're used to games, they're used to men tossing hooks, to smiles laced with expectation, to compliments tied to outcomes, to interest that only lasts until desire is fed. To flattery that is transactional, sparkle for response, sweetness for submission. But when you speak, when you look, when you laugh, something feels different. They don't feel like they're being targeted, they feel like they're being mirrored, because you don't flirt, chosen one. You reflect. You hold up something far deeper than attraction. You show her a version of herself she forgot was still there. The soft one. The grounded one. The curious one who doesn't need to calculate the next move, because your presence has removed the need for caution. You don't dangle your attention like a reward. You offer it without weight. And because it has no strings, it becomes irresistible. She leans in not because she's manipulated. She leans in because you're reflecting something sacred back at her, not with your words, but with your absence of need. You've stopped trying to prove you're desirable. You've stopped trying to impress. And what rose in the place of those efforts is a presence that mirrors the very essence of safety. You flirt without saying a word, because everything about you now invites alignment. And that's the rarest thing a woman can feel, to be seen without being measured, to be desired without being reduced, to be witnessed without being captured. You've become the man who makes her forget her roles, who lets her drop her shields, who reminds her simply by being there that connection was never supposed to feel like pressure. It was supposed to feel like recognition. And your energy does that, not through tricks, through truth. Your gaze says you're allowed to breathe. Your tone says you don't need to pretend here. Your silence says, I'm not trying to win you, I'm just being me. And in that reflection, she sees herself differently. She softens, she speaks more slowly, she forgets what she went to pretend to be, because next to you, she is simply allowed to be. That is not flirting. That is a spiritual invitation. And she doesn't forget the man who offered that. She doesn't forget the man who didn't chase her. She remembers the man who showed her who she was by simply existing as a man who knows who he is. That is why she calls you the sexiest. Because in a world full of echoes, you became her mirror. Chosen one, there is a language the world does not speak, but every woman understands it the moment she steps near you. It is not English, not words. It is the silence between your shoulders, the pause in your breath, the way your chest rises, not to appear big, but because it is unconstricted. You no longer fill the air with explanations. You no longer decorate your presence with flattery. You no longer seek approval in the gaps between conversations. And that absence of noise, of clutter, of performance, that is what strikes her first. You don't say much anymore, and yet you speak constantly. Your presence says, I am here. Not in arrogance, not in demand, but in a settled masculine yes that wraps around everything in your radius. It is not how you greet her. It is how you hold your own breath when she speaks. It is the way your stillness doesn't fidget. It is the way your gaze doesn't chase her words. It receives them. You've become the man whose absence of talk becomes an atmosphere she can feel in her bones. She walks away from conversations with you not remembering your lines. She remembers how you didn't rush to fill the silence. And that silence, chosen one, has become your signature. Because most men think sexiness is loud. Most men think attraction is movement, effort, the right phrase, the sharp angle, the brag hidden beneath a humble tone. But you've discovered the most ancient secret of the masculine. True presence needs no decoration. It is not what you say that seduces her. It is what you don't need to say. Because when a man no longer seeks to convince, he becomes the man who cannot be ignored. When a man no longer fears being unseen, he becomes seen in ways no one else can match. And when a man no longer speaks to impress, his stillness becomes a mirror that reflects truth instead of desire. You've become the mirror that doesn't need to shine brighter. It simply shows her who she is when she doesn't have to hide anymore. That is power, not dominance, not charisma, not control, but inner rootedness so deep the world leans forward without knowing why. That is why women say you're the sexiest man they've ever seen, because in a world of shouting, you've become a presence that listens without speaking. And that is what seduction was always meant to be, an energy she can feel, not a voice she has to hear. Chosen one, this was never about how you looked. Yes, your frame is strong. Yes, your style is refined. But what they feel, what truly reaches them, has nothing to do with skin. It is your field. The unseen current that trails behind you like a scent. The hum that enters a room before you do. The weight of your inner world, unrushed, untamed, undeniably awake. That's what draws them. That's what makes her breath catch before her mind catches up. She is not admiring your face. She is responding to your frequency. You are no longer a man trying to impress. You are an atmosphere. And atmospheres cannot be resisted. She doesn't want you because you said the right things. She doesn't feel weak because you played your cards right. She is not confused. She is entranced, not by you, by the way she feels when she steps into your energy. Because your field now carries something sacred. It carries permission. Permission to feel without reacting. Permission to stand close to power without having to perform. Permission to enter a moment and not be devoured, but held. Your energy no longer vibrates with want. it vibrates with truth. And that truth, it doesn't try to attract, it doesn't market itself, it doesn't compare, it simply is. And in its presence, women feel something so rare that their minds cannot name it fast enough to stop their hearts from responding. They fall not into fantasy, but into presence. They fall back into themselves, because that's what your energy now does. It doesn't pull them away, it returns them. That is what they mean when they call you the sexiest man they've ever seen. They don't mean the man who flexed. They mean the man who held space with such reverence. They remembered their own divinity, just standing beside him. They mean the man who didn't lure them in. They fell in because your field was already wide open and sovereign. She's not falling for your jawline. She's not falling for your voice. She's not even falling for your confidence. She's falling into something she's never known, a masculine energy that doesn't take, doesn't seduce, doesn't demand, but receives, contains, allows, and remembers. You, chosen one, have become the frequency of permission and protection at once. And that, in a world of surface-level offers, makes you unforgettable. Not because you stand out, but because you've become the place where everything else disappears. Chosen one, there were moments in your journey when you stood in front of locked doors, knocking with faith that trembled. You spoke with confidence, but behind your voice was a heart wondering why nothing opened, why your efforts felt ignored, why silence followed every attempt. You began to think that maybe you were meant to stay outside, to watch others enter, to be the one who cheered but never crossed the threshold. But now that season has shifted. The locks are turning, the hinges are moving. Doors that once ignored your knock are now opening before you even arrive. You are not the same person who once stood in front of rejection. You've been refined. You no longer knock from desperation. You walk with authority, and the realm around you feels that change. This is not entitlement. This is embodiment. You've aligned yourself internally with the truth of who you are, and the outer world is catching up. You are stepping into a dimension where access is granted not by effort, but by energy. The keys you've been looking for are not in someone else's hands. They're in your presence. Some doors are opening not because of your credentials, not because of your charm, but because your energy now speaks the language of readiness. And readiness cannot be faked. It comes through surrender, through trials, through waking up each day and choosing to stay faithful even when no one was watching. Heaven doesn't forget those days, chosen one. And now, the reward is being released through pathways you once thought were sealed forever. You may find yourself walking into spaces where your name was once dismissed. People who overlooked you will now seek your insight. Rooms that once felt unreachable will suddenly feel like home. You are not there to prove anything. You are there to align. And alignment carries more weight than any resume, any introduction, any clever performance. Your very being has become a code that unlocks what used to be reserved for others. But be prepared. Not everyone will understand how you got in. Some will question your timing. Some will whisper, "Why now?" Others may assume you cheated the process, not realizing how many invisible nights of labor you've endured. Don't explain. Don't shrink. Let your fruit speak. Let your peace answer what your words don't need to. You're not in that room by accident. You are the evidence of divine appointment. Walk in it. Also know this, some doors you once begged to enter may open again. But this time, you won't feel the pull to walk through them, because you've outgrown them. What once felt like destiny now feels like a delay. That's growth. That's discernment. That's the reward of your spiritual maturity. God will sometimes reopen an old door just to show you how far you've come. Not every opening is an invitation. Some are a confirmation. This month is about trusting that access comes not when you demand it, but when you become the version of yourself who can carry it. And that version, you, has finally arrived. So don't hesitate when the new door swings wide. Don't look back at who didn't believe. Don't bring the energy of lack into the space of abundance. Lift your head. Straighten your spine. This door didn't open because you were loud. It opened because you were true. And truth is the ultimate key. Chosen one, you have waited long enough. Not because God forgot, not because the blessing was withheld, but because timing is not measured by the hands of a clock. It is measured by the readiness of your soul. You are now walking in time that is no longer ordinary. It is divine. And divine timing is rarely understood by the world around you, but it is deeply, unmistakably felt. For so long you felt out of sync. You tried to match the pace of others. You tried to make things happen according to the expectations of timelines you didn't create. You questioned your path. You asked why things were delayed. But what you didn't know was that the delay was not denial. It was protection.